Now, some of us went through this legal rigmarole of trying to hold Bush accountable for crimes in 2004 when he came on his official visit. This was right after the slaughter in Fallujah. We tried all the legal channels to keep him out of the country. We wrote to Judy Scrow, remember her? Exercise your powers under the Immigration Act. He's a war criminal. Here's a ton of documents. Many studies by the American military themselves, keep him out. When they refused, we also said charge him under the Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act. Here are all the offenses he committed. When they refused, we tried the only possibility available to us, which was a torture convention. That's why we charged him with torture, was because it was the only one that we could do without getting the consent of the government to start the ball rolling. The torture convention allows individuals to prosecute without the consent of the government. It's from the 1980s. It's a holdover. They didn't realize then how it could be used. And it's in the Criminal Code, section 269.1. And torture is defined not, by organ failure, the way the John Yoo defined it, but severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, intentionally inflicted on a person for a purpose including obtaining from the person information, punishing a person for the act of that person, intimidating or coercing the person or third person, or for any reason based on discrimination. It's not hard to fit waterboarding into that, right? It's a mock execution, and it's suffocation, and let alone the old-fashioned sexual and physical abuse from Abu Ghraib. Okay, so it's not a problem of finding the evidence of torture and then linking Bush to it with his memos and with his discussions. I mean, there's tons of evidence for this. And the aiding and abetting, counseling, engaging in a conspiracy. We had a ton of counts. As I said, we relied on it because it doesn't require the government's consent to get the ball rolling. Kind of like getting Al Capone for tax evasion, right? It's but if you could do it, it would be worth doing. But then we got tangled up in the courts, and each court, one after another, found one reason or another. Bogus. I'm telling you, they're bogus. Of course, every lawyer who loses says it's bogus, but I'm telling you, it's bogus. One reason after another to deny our prosecution. They even put a gag order on it. You didn't hear about it for a year, right? It was a gag order. You couldn't talk about it. What happened to the Bush prosecution? They used to write. Okay. It wasn't the facts of the torture. It was they used in that case diplomatic immunity, even though he'd left the country. So this is too complicated. State immunity they used at the time, and state immunity explicitly from Nuremberg on doesn't apply to crimes against humanity, right? But the judges were appointed by the government. I hate to let you in on this secret. The judges are appointed by the Liberals or the Tories. They think like them. They see the world like them. And you don't get appointed a judge by being the kind of person who rocks the boat. Anyway, so you can read. I think you can read the judgments, and they're embarrassing, I guess, if they still have their blush glands working. Anyway, you still need the consent of the government in this little. I'm sorry to be technical with you. You still need the consent of the government after 8 days, and we never got that far. By the time the whole thing was over, they said, okay, our arguments are wrong, but by the way, the 8 days have passed. You haven't got the consent of the government. So I don't think it matters very much. The bottom line is that Bush isn't president anymore. I mean, he can't even claim diplomatic or state immunity anymore, even though it was bogus then. Nor Clinton, for that matter. Nor Bill Clinton, for that matter. And, maybe I was being a little bit unfair to Bush to say that he was the biggest mass murderer of our time. Even if we stick to Iraq. Clinton was bombing Iraq while George Bush was, all he could do was sign 150 or so death warrants in Texas to kill Texans. But Bush was killing civilians for years in Iraq. And of course, most importantly, let's not forget it, that Clinton put his fist down on the sanctions that UNICEF said killed 500,000 Iraqi children. Now that's even more than George F.W. Bush, if I may say so. Clinton started the rendition program. He was the first one who started the rendition program in the mid-90s. He was the one who made sure the U.S. wouldn't be subject to the International Criminal Court. Bush didn't know what to do when he became president to undermine it, because Clinton had refused to ratify it, so Bush tried to de-sign it or something, but it made no difference because Clinton said, we're never joining this court until we get our guarantees, which are basically that we will never be charged. He was the one who bombed Serbia, right, against the Charter, and broke the sacred pact of the Charter of the United Nations, and created the precedent for Bush when Cheney said, look, we don't need the authority of the United Nations. Look what happened in Serbia. Okay, and then he set up another court to try his enemies. This was another Canadian judge, Louise Arbour. And she was put in charge, Canadian judge, and she conveniently ignored the crimes that the whole world was saying outside this little bubble that we live in, was saying, what are you, you're bombing a country? This kind of carpet bombing using depleted uranium and indiscriminately bombing, and you have no authority from the Security Council, and another war fought on lies. This is a very important precedent, actually, to free up the United States from the authority of the United Nations. So, we've got two of these guys here, and it's really difficult to tell who's the vilest of the two. And I must say, although Clinton has a great reputation for some reason, really in vileness, it's really close. The war crimes business, basically, that we're talking about today was set up essentially as a weapon of big power imperialism. Now, what are they doing with the war crimes? Who's being tried for war? We're trying to get George Bush tried for war crimes here. Who's being tried for war crimes? Well, the International Criminal Court, this guy Ocampo and all this, right, and the Canadians galore are busy putting Africa on trial. The Central African Republic, Uganda, these are the people who are on trial. What are they on trial for? They're on trial for wars that have been started and stoked by the imperialists who want those resources and want to control Africa. I mean, Clinton again. Think of Clinton again. Think of Rwanda. This guy was convicted for crimes in Rwanda for the massacres in Rwanda that took place in 1994. But it was Clinton. Clinton should be up there before this guy. I'm not making this up. Jerry Kaplan report. Look, there's a ton of reports. Clinton and Madeleine Albright put their foot down and said, the Rwandan government was saying, please intervene. There's an attack going on from Uganda. We're under attack. Please intervene and stop this. And that's when the killings took place on both sides. And Clinton said, no. And Madeleine Albright, they went around to Boutros Ghali and said, we're not letting anybody intervene here until the invading RPF wins, because they're our people. And they're the government. This is the Kagame government that's in power now. It's been in power since, and the bases are there. In other words, the Americans did not want this to stop because their guys were winning until their guys had won. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. Okay, so the notion of, it's very strange with these war crimes tribunals. They set up many international tribunals. There was one in Belgium, remember, and in Spain, and of course in Canada we have one. And every time people say charge Sharon, charge Bush, charge Cheney, they say, oh, we can't get them. And what do they get? They always get Hutus. They always get Hutus for the same civil war, which basically was in Africa. So these are, this whole war crimes business is very suspect.